We're not afraid of loneliness. We're afraid of intimacy that might not live up to our expectations. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you declined an opportunity to get to know someone better? How many times have you kept your true feelings locked away, putting on a mask of, "I'm fine"? How many times has your heart told you to open up, while your mind stubbornly insisted, "No, it's too risky"? Humans are strange creatures. We crave intimacy, seek it out, celebrate it in songs, make movies about it, write books about it, and simultaneously run from it like it's fire. We create complex self-defense mechanisms that gradually transform into prisons for our hearts. Today, we'll talk about why the fear of intimacy isn't just a personal problem, but an epidemic of our modern age. We'll break down the deep-rooted causes of this fear and, most importantly, what to do about it. There's a strange paradox. We want to be close to others, but we're afraid to open up. We crave intimate connection, but we hide behind masks. In psychology, this is called ambivalence toward intimacy. Sigmund Freud described it as a conflict between the need for unity with others and the fear of losing one's identity. Even then, he noticed that people often find themselves in a stalemate between two basic needs: the desire for closeness and the need for autonomy. But why is it so difficult for us to balance these needs? Why do we tend to retreat when another person gets too close? Imagine this situation. Andrew, a successful manager, meets Elena at a corporate event. There's an immediate attraction. At first, everything goes wonderfully. They exchange messages, go on dates, laugh, and gradually open up to each other. But the moment the relationship starts to get serious, when simple "I like you" becomes insufficient, Andrew suddenly feels a strange discomfort. He begins canceling meetings, responding with delays, looking for reasons to conflict. And all this happens as if automatically, beyond conscious control. Is this fear of commitment? Not exactly. It's the fear of intimacy, the fear of being truly seen, with all your flaws, vulnerabilities, and inner demons. Our fear of intimacy doesn't arise from nowhere. Its roots reach deep into our childhood, into the earliest years of life when basic attachment patterns are formed. John Bowlby, a British psychoanalyst, proposed attachment theory, which explains how early relationships with parents shape our subsequent relationships with people. According to this theory, children whose needs for safety, comfort, and emotional support were met consistently and predictably develop a secure attachment style. They know how to trust others and themselves, approaching closeness without fear. On the other hand, children whose needs were met inconsistently or ignored often develop anxious or avoidant attachment patterns. In adulthood, this manifests as fear of intimacy or inability to achieve it. Think about your own experience. Perhaps when you opened up to your parents, they dismissed your feelings. Maybe you were taught that real men don't cry or that good girls don't get angry. Perhaps you grew up in a family where emotions weren't openly expressed, where love wasn't spoken in words but replaced with material care. All of this forms the foundation for a future fear of intimacy. But beyond early experiences, there are other factors. Once burned, twice shy. This proverb perfectly describes how traumatic experiences from past relationships affect our ability to open up to new people. Each betrayal, each breakup, each disappointment leaves a scar on our heart. These scars become evidence that opening up means becoming vulnerable, and vulnerability leads to pain. Remember your last unsuccessful attempt to get close to someone. How did you feel afterward? Did the thought "never again" cross your mind? Did you close yourself off a little more after this experience? Psychoanalyst Erich Fromm wrote about the escape from freedom, the paradoxical phenomenon when a person fears getting what they supposedly desire. In the context of intimacy, this manifests as a fear of losing control over one's life, feelings, and decisions. Intimacy implies a certain degree of dependence on another person. We begin to consider their needs, thoughts, feelings. We're forced to compromise, yield, negotiate. For many people, especially those who value their independence and autonomy, this can seem threatening. Love is the voluntary surrender of a portion of freedom for the sake of closeness with another person. Irvin Yalom. Did you know that from a neurobiological perspective, social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain? Evolutionarily, this makes sense. For our ancestors, being expelled from the tribe meant almost certain death. The fear of being rejected, dismissed, deemed not good enough, this is one of the strongest human fears. And the closer we let someone get, the more painful their rejection can be. Remember school teasing, teenage mockery, your first broken heart? These are all examples of rejection that are deeply imprinted in our psyche. This fear is especially acute in people with low self-esteem who constantly seek confirmation of their value in the eyes of others. If you see the real me, you won't be able to love me. This destructive thought lies at the heart of many fears of intimacy. Modern society, with its cult of success and perfect images on social media, only intensifies this fear. We see filtered images of perfect lives and begin to believe that our own is not good enough to show. Perfectionists are particularly prone to fear of intimacy, as intimacy inevitably exposes our flaws and weaknesses. And how can you show something imperfect when you've spent your whole life striving to be perfect? The fear of intimacy is not an abstract concept. It has concrete manifestations in our daily lives. This is a phenomenon where a person is physically present in a relationship but emotionally absent. They avoid deep conversations, don't share their experiences, and maintain distance. For example, Marina and Sergey have been married for 10 years. From the outside, their marriage looks perfect. A beautiful house, 2 children, family vacations. But in reality, they've long become emotional strangers. They discuss household matters, weekend plans, children's school grades. But they don't talk about their fears, hopes, dreams. Sergey doesn't know that Marina secretly dreams of returning to painting, and Marina has no idea that Sergey fears losing his job due to automation in his industry. They live side by side but not together. When a person constantly moves from one relationship to another, not allowing them to develop into something deeper, this can be a sign of fear of intimacy. The romantic honeymoon phase is exciting and safe. We show our best sides, and our partner idealizes us. But every relationship sooner or later transitions to the phase of getting to know the real person, and it's at this moment that people with a fear of intimacy often flee, eager to experience the safe euphoria of initial infatuation with someone new. Sorry, can't make it today, need to finish a project. I'd love to, but I have a deadline. Let's do it next week, I have a lot of work right now. Sound familiar? Work is a great way to avoid intimacy, especially because society approves and even encourages workaholism. We call such people ambitious, goal-oriented, successful, not noticing that this often hides an inability or fear to build deep relationships. A person with a fear of intimacy often uses various defense mechanisms. Intellectualization, turning emotional topics into abstract discussions. Instead of talking about feelings for a partner, a person might philosophize about the nature of love in general. Humor, using jokes to diffuse emotionally tense situations. As soon as a conversation becomes too serious or intimate, a joke appears that changes its direction. Changing the subject. When a conversation approaches something personal, the person suddenly switches to another topic. Aggression or detachment. Some people react to emotional closeness with irritability, or conversely, emotional coldness. This raises the question, is fear of intimacy always bad? Maybe it's just a defense mechanism that protects us from pain. Although fear of intimacy does indeed protect us from potential pain, the price of this protection is exorbitantly high. We can be surrounded by people, colleagues, acquaintances, even friends and relatives, and still feel deep, piercing loneliness. Because true closeness is not just physical presence nearby, it's an emotional connection, a feeling of being heard, accepted, understood. Without the ability to establish deep connections, we are doomed to loneliness in the crowd, a condition that American sociologist David Reisman called one of the main problems of modern society, as far back as the mid-20th century. When we fear intimacy, our relationships become like skating on ice, fast, exciting, but superficial. We talk about the weather, politics, the latest TV shows, but not about what truly matters, what hurts, what brings joy. Such relationships don't give us a sense of deep support. They don't nourish us emotionally or allow us to truly be ourselves. When we constantly hide our true thoughts, feelings, desires, we gradually lose connection with ourselves. We forget who we really are, what we like, what we aspire to. Psychologist Carl Rogers described this as a gap between the real self and the ideal self. The larger this gap, the stronger the internal conflict, and the worse a person's psychological well-being. According to psychosomatic medicine, emotions we don't express don't disappear without a trace. They transform into bodily symptoms. Unexpressed anger, suppressed sadness, restrained fear can manifest as headaches, digestive problems, chronic fatigue, skin conditions, and other physical issues. The body keeps the score, writes psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk in his book. And this is not a metaphor, but a physiological reality. And so we come to the main paradox. What we fear, vulnerability, is actually the key to overcoming the fear of intimacy. Brené Brown, a vulnerability researcher, conducted thousands of interviews with people and discovered a strange pattern. Those who feel happiest, most loved, most whole, these are people who allow themselves to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is our most accurate measure of courage, she writes in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection. Think about it. It takes tremendous courage to say, I'm afraid, I don't know, I made a mistake, I'm hurting, I need help. It's much easier to hide behind a mask of self-sufficiency, confidence, irony. But it's precisely this courage to be vulnerable that creates space for true intimacy. How to overcome the fear of intimacy? How to learn to build deep, authentic connections with others? The first step is to recognize how you avoid intimacy. What's your defense mechanism? Maybe you become too busy when relationships start to deepen, or you start looking for flaws in your partner, or perhaps you simply emotionally distance yourself. Practice self-observation. Try throughout the day to notice when and how you close off from others. What happens before this? What thoughts and feelings arise? As we've already discovered, many fears of intimacy arise in childhood. Try to remember your early relationships with your parents. Did you feel safe when expressing your needs and feelings? How did your family treat the expression of emotions, especially negative ones, anger, sadness, fear? Were there significant people in your life who betrayed your trust? This doesn't mean blaming parents or anyone else. The goal is to understand where your fears come from so they can be transformed. The fear of intimacy cannot be overcome in one leap. It's a gradual process that requires patience and the courage to take small steps. Start with safe vulnerability. Share something personal with someone you trust. It doesn't necessarily have to be a deep trauma or secret. Maybe it's a dream you've never told anyone about or a fear you usually hide. Observe your feelings before, during, and after this experience. Notice that most often other people's reactions to our vulnerability are much warmer and more understanding than we expect. Many people avoid intimacy simply because they don't know how to distinguish and express their emotions. They feel something unpleasant, but can't determine exactly what. Anger, fear, shame, sadness. Psychologist Mark Brackett, author of The Concept of Emotional Literacy, offers a simple tool, the mood meter. It's a chart where the vertical axis is the energy level of the emotion, from low to high, and the horizontal axis is its pleasantness, from unpleasant to pleasant. By placing our feelings on this chart, we learn to better recognize and understand them. Try several times throughout the day to stop and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Where in my body do I feel this? How intense is this feeling? One of the main obstacles on the path to intimacy is a harsh, self-critical attitude. We're afraid to show our flaws because we ourselves consider them unacceptable. Psychologist Kristin Neff developed the concept of self-compassion, which includes three components: self-kindness instead of harsh self-judgment, common humanity, understanding that suffering and imperfection are part of the shared human experience, mindfulness, balanced awareness of one's thoughts and feelings without over-identifying with them. Practice self-compassion daily. Ask yourself, how would I talk to a close friend who found themselves in this situation? And apply this same tone to yourself. If the fear of intimacy seriously affects the quality of your life, it might be worth consulting a professional psychologist or psychotherapist. The therapeutic relationship itself is a model of safe intimacy where you can practice openness and vulnerability. There are various therapeutic approaches that can be helpful. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, helps identify and change destructive thoughts and beliefs that support the fear of intimacy. Emotionally focused therapy, EFT, concentrates on emotional patterns in relationships and helps create a secure emotional bond. Psychodynamic therapy explores how early childhood experiences affect current relationships. The world is changing, and our ways of interacting with others are also transforming. The digital age creates new challenges for intimacy. Social media give us a sense of connection with hundreds of people. We see their photos, read their thoughts, like their posts, but this creates only an illusion of closeness. Psychologist Sherry Turkle, in her book Alone Together, writes that technology offers us to be together even when we are physically alone. But aren't we losing something important by replacing looking into the eyes with looking at the screen? On social media, we show a filtered version of our lives, the best moments, the most beautiful angles, the most successful achievements. We create an idealized image that increasingly diverges from reality. This habit of showing only the good easily transfers to offline communication, making us incapable of true vulnerability. In a world where information changes at the speed of a click, we lose the ability for deep, focused listening. We scan messages, scroll through feeds, switch channels, and just as superficially listen to each other. But intimacy requires presence, full, undivided attention to another person. Perhaps we need a new model of intimacy, one that takes into account the realities of the modern world but doesn't sacrifice the depth of connection. Instead of striving for a perfect image of yourself and demanding perfection from others, we can cultivate acceptance of imperfection, our own and others. Real intimacy emerges not when we show our strengths, but when we dare to reveal our weaknesses. In a world where success is often measured in numbers, number of friends, followers, likes, we can consciously choose quality over quantity. A few deep, genuine relationships are much more valuable than hundreds of superficial acquaintances. Maybe we don't need to give up technology, but we should use it consciously. Establish gadget-free time for communicating with loved ones. Use video calls instead of text messages for important conversations. Periodically do a digital detox, time when we completely disconnect from the online world. What if we created a culture where vulnerability is valued more than pretended strength? Where the phrase, "I'm scared," evokes understanding and support, not judgment. Such a cultural shift starts small, with our own example, with how we respond to others' vulnerability, with the conversations we have with children about emotions and relationships. Let's conclude our conversation with specific techniques you can start practicing today. For the ordinary question, "How are you?" try giving an honest answer, not the automatic "I'm fine," but what you really feel. Start with people you trust, gradually expanding the circle. You'll be surprised how many deep and meaningful conversations can begin with a simple, "I've been feeling a bit anxious lately," instead of, "Everything's great." Designate one day a week when you share something personal with your partner or close friend. It could be a fear, doubt, dream, desire, anything you usually keep to yourself. Establish a rule. No advice, no attempts to fix the situation, just listening and support. Keep a journal where you record your emotions and thoughts. This will help you better understand yourself and, over time, more easily express your feelings to others. Try writing without censorship, without fear of judgment. This is your personal, safe space for exploring your inner world. This simple but powerful exercise involves silently gazing into your partner's eyes for 2 to 4 minutes. No talking, no jokes, no distractions, just looking into the eyes and allowing yourself to be seen. At first, this might cause discomfort, but with practice, it becomes a powerful tool for deepening connection. If the topic of intimacy is particularly difficult for you, consider joining a support group or attending an emotional intelligence workshop. Sometimes it's easier to practice vulnerability in a structured environment with people who are overcoming similar challenges. The fear of intimacy manifests not only in romantic relationships, but in other areas as well. Think about how many of your friendships are based on shared activities or interests but don't include emotional closeness. How many friends could you call at 3 a.m. during a crisis? True friendship requires vulnerability no less than romantic relationships. And it's often just as difficult to achieve, especially for men who are taught from childhood that real friends are those with whom you drink beer and discuss football, not share fears and insecurities. Family relationships often suffer from the unspoken rule, we don't talk about this. Painful topics, old grudges, unresolved conflicts, all this can lie beneath the surface, undermining the quality of relationships. How many adult children feel that their parents never really knew them? How many parents, despite their love for their children, can't find the words to express their feelings? In a professional environment, fear of intimacy can manifest as reluctance to share ideas, admit mistakes, ask for help. We're afraid to appear incompetent, weak, uncertain. And yet, teams where people feel psychological safety can be vulnerable without fear of punishment, demonstrate the highest efficiency and creative potential, as shown by Google's research in the Aristotle Project. The fear of intimacy can block creative self-expression. After all, creativity is a form of deep vulnerability, opening your inner world to others. How many unwritten books, uncreated paintings, unplayed roles remain unrealized due to fear of being judged, misunderstood, or rejected? We've already mentioned the challenges that technology creates for intimacy, but there's another side to the coin. Sometimes technology helps us overcome barriers that exist in the real world. People who experience social anxiety can find true connection in online communities. Lovers separated by distance can maintain an emotional bond through video calls. Psychologist John Suler describes the online disinhibition effect, a phenomenon where people on the internet often feel freer to share personal information and express emotions than in face-to-face communication. Technology offers us unprecedented convenience in communication, but often at the expense of depth. A text message cannot convey the nuances of intonation, body language, the energy of personal presence. We face a paradox. Never before has it been so easy to communicate and so difficult to truly connect. Instead of contrasting digital and real communication, perhaps our task is to find a healthy balance. To use the strengths of each format while being aware of their limitations. Psychologist Jordan Grafman proposes the concept of hybrid relationships, a combination of online and offline interaction where technology complements, not replaces, personal communication. In many spiritual traditions, closeness with others is seen as a path to closeness with oneself and with a higher power. Buddhism teaches about dependent origination, the idea that all beings and phenomena exist in interconnection. The Bodhisattva, the ideal of Mahayana Buddhism, is one who postpones personal enlightenment to help others. In this tradition, fear of intimacy is seen as a manifestation of the illusion of a separate self, isolated from others. Practices of loving kindness, metta, and compassion, karuna, aim to overcome this illusion. In the Christian tradition, God is love, and the ability to love others is seen as a reflection of the divine nature in humans. Martin Buber, a Jewish philosopher, wrote about I-thou relationships, where another person is perceived not as an object, but as a sacred presence, and it's in this encounter that we come to know God. Most spiritual traditions recognize the paradox. True strength comes through vulnerability, not through control or domination. Whether it's the crucified Christ or Buddha giving himself to a tigress and her hungry cubs, spiritual narratives show us that the deepest wisdom is often found in moments of greatest openness. Modern science confirms the importance of intimacy for our physical and mental health. When we feel an emotional connection with another person, our brain produces oxytocin, often called the love hormone. It not only creates a feeling of pleasure and trust, but also lowers levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, and can even accelerate wound healing. Neurobiologist Stephen Porges developed the polyvagal theory, which explains how the nervous system responds to threats and how social connection helps regulate stress. Research shows that people with strong social bonds live longer and have a lower risk of many diseases, from cardiovascular to oncological. For example, the famous Harvard study of adult development, which lasted over 75 years, showed that the quality of relationships is the most important predictor of happiness and health in old age. Intimacy is a powerful protective factor against depression, anxiety, and even post-traumatic stress disorder. Psychotherapist Irvin Yalom included isolation in the list of 4 existential givens, inevitable conditions of human existence that each of us must cope with. Let's look at the fear of intimacy from a more existential perspective. Philosopher Ernest Becker, in his book The Denial of Death, argues that many of our fears and defense mechanisms are ultimately attempts to cope with our awareness of mortality. When we love someone, we become vulnerable not only to their rejection, but also to the pain of loss. Love makes us more acutely aware of the fragility and temporality of life. Existentialists, such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, spoke about the anxiety of freedom, the fear of unlimited choice possibilities, and responsibility for these choices. Intimacy requires decision, a conscious choice to open up to another, to take responsibility for one's feelings and actions. This can cause existential anxiety, especially in a culture that often propagates the idea that true happiness is complete independence and self-sufficiency. Psychoanalyst Otto Rank described the conflict between the fear of separation and the fear of union. We fear being abandoned, but we also fear being engulfed by another, losing our identity. True intimacy requires a delicate balance between connection and autonomy, between we and I. Modern Western culture is largely built on the values of individualism, personal freedom, self-expression, self-realization. This has brought much good but has also created new challenges for intimacy. Take care of yourself. You don't owe anyone anything. Live your life. These mottos of modernity carry a liberating message for those who have been in toxic, controlling relationships. But sometimes they are interpreted as justification for emotional isolation. Psychologist Barry Schwartz calls this the paradox of choice. Having more freedom and possibilities than ever, we often feel more lonely and dissatisfied. The consumerist attitude, looking for a better offer, upgrading at the first difficulties, treating people as replaceable resources, is becoming increasingly common in the world of dating apps and social media. But true intimacy cannot be consumed. It must be created in the process of growing together through successes and failures, joy and pain. Perhaps we need a new model of individuality, one that recognizes the value of autonomy and self-realization, but also understands that the fullness of human experience includes deep connections with others? Philosopher Martha Nussbaum proposes the concept of interdependent autonomy, the idea that our individuality develops best not in isolation, but through meaningful connections with others. Intimacy is an art that requires practice, patience, and courage. It's not just a natural state to which we return after removing defenses. It's an active process of creating a space where two people can be genuine, vulnerable, and connected. We cannot truly connect with others if we are not connected with ourselves. Self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and inner integration are the foundation on which the capacity for intimacy is built. Intimacy is not a static state, but a dynamic process, similar to a dance. Sometimes we approach, sometimes we retreat, sometimes we lead, sometimes we follow. It's important to find a rhythm that works for both partners, losing neither connection nor self. Like any skill, the ability for intimacy requires constant practice. We will make mistakes, lose balance, fall, and get up again. With each attempt, we become a little more capable of true vulnerability and connection. Every day, every hour, every minute, we have a choice to open up or close off, to take a step toward or retreat, to trust or protect ourselves. And although the fear of intimacy may seem insurmountable, it's important to remember that the last word always remains with us. We can choose love despite fear. We can choose vulnerability despite risk. We can choose intimacy despite uncertainty. Perhaps wisdom is not in being fearless, but in moving forward even when you're afraid. As Rilke wrote, perhaps everything frightening is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that needs our help. The fear of intimacy is not just an obstacle to overcome. It's an invitation to a more authentic, more connected, more whole way of being in the world and with others. And though the path to true intimacy may not be easy, it's worth every step. Here's my question to you. What small but brave step toward greater intimacy can you take today? Can you open up to someone a little more than usual? Can you listen to someone a little more attentively? Can you allow yourself to be a little more vulnerable, a little less protected? Share your experience in the comments. What do you feel when you allow yourself to be more open? What's your biggest fear that holds you back from deeper connections? What helps you feel safe enough to open up to others? Share your thoughts. And remember, you're not alone. We're all on this journey together. The biggest risk is not taking any risk. In a world that changes quickly, the only strategy that is guaranteed to fail is not taking risks at all. Mark Zuckerberg. This is true not only for business or innovation, it's true for relationships as well. The biggest risk in life is to live it without daring to experience true intimacy, without daring to be truly seen and to truly see another. So take a step, open your heart, allow yourself to be vulnerable, because on the other side of fear awaits what you've been searching for all your life.